I've been living in Australia for nearly 4 years and I'm happy to say I've become a little bit more Australian. I can even apply for my citizenship in a few months. But it took moving to the other side of the world all the way to Australia to realise these British things that I didn't realise were so British. And I didn't realise until I moved to Australia that British people are slightly more passive aggressive. I mean, it doesn't really help that they always seem to be a little bit grumpy. I know the weather and the dark nights in winter have a lot to do about it, even in the summer when you're expecting it to be nice and it just seems to be constantly pissing it down with rain. Seeing my friends back in the rain in the UK does actually make me laugh when we move into winter in Australia. But moving to Australia and realising just how chilled Australian people are, it only really goes to emphasise how miserable UK people can be. What kind of world would you want to live in? A world where positivity literally shines through on a day-to-day basis, or living with a load of other miserable fucks in the rain? And then they proceed to ask you if you're alright all the time, just as a normal greeting. British people do love to take the piss. Which hot drink do you prefer? Are you a tea person? Are you a coffee person? Well, when I lived in the UK, I thought it was pretty 50-50, but also quite polarising in what people would like to drink. In Australia, perhaps a bit like America, coffee seems to be king. But when it came to tea drinkers, in the UK, it was pretty exclusive that if you liked tea, a standard English breakfast tea with a bit of milk, perhaps some sugar if you're a heathen, seemed to be an acceptable staple for just a regular hot drink. That to me seemed a very British thing. But when I moved to Australia and people would like to drink tea, there's all these different other weird teas. Some that smell like flowers, some that are different colours. I didn't even know there was such a range of different teas. It seems like the standard English breakfast tea, which we didn't even call it English breakfast tea in the UK, it was just tea, mate. Do you want a cup of tea? But it seems that when you move to the rest of the world, tea can mean lots of different things. Except that English breakfast tea over here doesn't really taste the same. There's one thing if you're going to move to Australia and you really like tea, just bring your own, mate, or spend loads at one of those English shops. Is the food better in the UK versus Australia? Some people might sit on the fence. They're absolutely wrong. I think the food, generally speaking, is better in Australia, even though Coles and Woolies want to charge the world for it. But there's one thing that I think the UK beats Australia on with regards to food, hands down. Why aren't meal deals a thing in Australia? Come to think of it, I don't think meal deals are even a thing anywhere else in the world. And I'm talking about a lunchtime meal deal here. What is a lunchtime meal deal? Popularised by most supermarkets in the UK, a lunchtime meal deal is for a certain fixed price, you get to choose a different sandwich, a drink, and normally something savoury like a bag of chips. But I know that they've bastardised that type of thing now and it kind of includes a lot of other things. And whilst some meal deals are better than others, and you're weird if you don't agree, if you wanted to get a meal deal in Australia, it doesn't really exist. And it's quite disappointing. Even though there are other probably better lunchtime meal options, weirdly, having a meal deal seems to be kind of like a British rite of passage, accompanied with the argument about which one is best. A sandwich with as much meat as you can get, probably some version of McCoy's, and then a Diet Coke. And you can't change my mind. Is it just me, or do British people exclusively apologise all the time? Why are British people so sorry? I didn't realise how British this was until I moved to Australia and I was apologising for even the most unapologetic things, that it occurred to me, why do I have to be so sorry? Most of the time I'm not even doing anything wrong and it's actually the other person. But when you move to Australia and you apologise for things that don't really matter, and they just look at you a bit weird. Could be because you just asked them if they're alright. But you learn pretty quickly that you don't need to apologise for everything, which makes you feel better, even when you're just asking people for things. Sorry, excuse me. Just the excuse me would have sufficed. Australians are pretty unapologetic. Sometimes even if they've done something wrong. But one of the key things that I've learned since moving to Australia is it's better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. Maybe I'm going back to my British roots, except I don't apologise about it as a course of habit. The Australian accent is a very strong, you either love it or you hate it. I personally love it, and I love to think that my own accent is slightly changing to be a bit more Australian. But I don't think that in Australia, regional accents seem to be a thing. Sure, some people in Australia do sound more Australian. Some people would call it bogan, but it doesn't really change from the Australian style that we know and love. Sometimes the Australian accent could just get a little bit softer. I know that perhaps in South Australia, some Britishisms seem to have migrated into the Australian accent, but you don't really get that much regional element to it. Not like in the UK, where it seems like you can travel 30 miles and the accent could have changed twice. Maybe I'm not quite hearing it correctly. Maybe I haven't been here for long enough. Maybe I'm spending my time with too many bogans. But apart from the bullshit Australian-y stuff that Eshays seem to come up with, regional accents in Australia don't seem to be so much of a thing. And I'm now even finding it difficult that when I meet British people in Australia, I can't really pick where they're from. And coming from Kent, everyone just sounds northern to me, even north of the Thames. Now, living in Brisbane, we are fortunate enough to have around 300 sunshine days per year. And when you've got that many days of sunshine, weirdly enough, more of them seem to happen in the winter, you don't really get too fussed when the sun's out. I mean, you're happy. Your general well-being is improved. You have a constant smile on your face as a result of the sun. But maybe it's a very British thing that as soon as the sun comes out, you just seem to go batshit crazy and want to fill all of those nice things that you do when the sun is out within about an 8-hour period. Have you got the barbecue ready? Where's the mini paddling pool? Is it in the shed? Do I need to go and buy a new one? Fuck me, it's that hot, I need to buy another fan. When the sun comes out in the UK, people just migrate to parks like zombies and proceed to lay around on the ground, perhaps throwing things at each other, trying to turn into lobsters. They seem to throw all sense out of the window and even forget to apply sunscreen, which if you did that in Australia, when the sun is out, you turn into a piece of pork crackling. But if you're listening to this list and you're thinking to yourself, actually Ross, I couldn't give two tosses about missing these things when I move away from the UK, and a life in Australia sounds genuinely better for you, then you're probably going to have to start with a visa. And weirdly enough, that's advice that I can't really give. I mean, I can tell you about the visa that I got, but I'm no real expert in this field. So if you want to move to Australia and you have no idea where to start, then you want to speak to the experts, True Blue Migration Services. They're one of Australia's largest and oldest reputable group of MARA registered agents. They've got more positive reviews on Google than people will probably laugh at my jokes. And if you're genuinely interested in moving to Australia and you want a free assessment for what visa options are most appropriate for you, then just follow the link in the description down below, tell them we sent you, and they'll do exactly that. I know since starting this channel, we've helped hundreds, if not thousands of people with free advice that could lead them onto living their best lives down under. So unless you're here to listen to the whinging pom musings of some idiot that moved to Australia, probably want to see if you can give them a call. Now, when you move to Australia and people find out that you're British, it doesn't take very long until they start calling you a whinging pom. But I never realised how British it was that when you complain or potentially whinge about something, you're never really saying what you mean. Now, you might be trying to highlight the negative aspects of something that you've just observed, but you don't really say it how it is. Australians, on the other hand, are so forward. Before you've even really realised what it is that they're talking about, they're telling you their full opinion, whether it's good or it's bad. And my God, don't let an Australian call you a whinging pom, because they love to whinge too. But why do British people pride themselves on not really saying what they really think? It just makes life so much easier. No more beating around the bush. In Australia, they will tell you exactly what they are thinking, warts and all. I mean, Australians aren't full of warts, that's just a phrase. Maybe it's because if British people say what they really think, they're probably just gonna have to apologise for it. When I lived in the UK, as a dog owner, I hated certain times of the year. Why? Because I'm not a child anymore and fireworks don't really impress me. And I used to hate the fact that around things like New Year's, Guy Fawkes night, or seemingly any time that idiots get hold of them for about a week of your life, it probably sounds like living on the Gaza Strip. But when you move to Australia, fireworks don't really seem to be a thing, mainly because they're illegal. I mean, not fully illegal, you can still see fireworks. You just got to go to a proper display. Most of the time, again, not being British, in Australia, a fireworks display, you just turn up and it's free. How many times have you ever turned up to a firework display in the UK and it seems like people can just charge for you looking into the sky? I never paid for it because I'm a tight bastard and I'd rather stand about 3 miles away, look up and just catch the top edge of the fireworks. Because they wanted stupid money for it as well. Thinking about it, it's probably the reason why so many idiots go out and buy their own fireworks. What's the point in spending 50 quid on watching a display with your family? Might as well just go and spend 50 quid down the shops on them. And when I say fireworks, I do mean the kind that are colourful when they blow up. Because I once did a New Year's on the continent in Germany, and their idea of fireworks is just getting those banger things and just throwing them at people. That was actually worse. One of the first things that I noticed when I moved to Australia was how clean and beautiful everything was. Not beautiful because it was clean, but obviously that accentuates it. And when my wife went back to the UK with my 2 young girls last year, one of the first things that she noticed was just how much shit there was everywhere. Just litter everywhere. Why do British people not care about the environment? I mean, they kind of do, which is ironic. You know, carbon targets and stuff like that. But what's the point in setting climate targets to kind of help climate change if literally the environment around you is full of your own filth? Because you can't be bothered to pick it up and put it in the bin. Fly tipping. It does happen in Australia. Some people drop litter. Some people just chuck their filth into places. Not like filth poo filth. That would just be wrong. But in the UK, it seems like they genuinely don't have a care for the environment. You know those beautiful sunny days that I was talking about? Yeah, British people just forget that there's litter bins that they can put their litter in. So after they're done sunbathing themselves until they go pink, just leave everything around. What a bunch of idiots. Now this next one, I think is exclusively British, but it seems to boggle the minds of so many people around the world, not just in Australia. But why in the UK did we put our washing machines in the kitchen? Now don't get me wrong, the standard argument for Australians is why would you want to put your dirty things in the place where you clean things? And I have to explain to them, it's not like I got my dirty pants, and when I say pants as a British person, I genuinely mean underpants, and then just spread them around on clean things in my kitchen. It doesn't happen, mate. You just take it and you put it into the washing machine. Now the common sense things would prevail in that the plumbing is in the kitchen. British houses are about 1/3 of the size of Australian ones, so that's like the only place that it can go. But even with those common sense types of reasons, why don't other places in the world also have them in the kitchen? It just seems to be a very British thing. Now I know that in the UK, posh people do have laundry rooms. Rishi Sunak probably had about 4 of them. But if you float the idea that you might want to put your washing machine in the kitchen in an Australian home, you will get looks of disgust. Very similar to the ones where you say, "You're right," as a greeting. It took a while for me when I first moved to Australia to get used to the idea that people can be friendly. And what I mean by that is when you're just walking around in the street, you accidentally make eye contact with someone, and maybe they might strike up a conversation. They might even fake a little bit of interest in you and your well-being. But it seemed to me that it was a very British thing. Keep your eyes on the floor in front of you and just never talk to anyone around you. How socially isolating is that? I challenge people that move to Australia to not make more friends as a result of being here, because I would have to say that this is one of the only places in the world where it's easy to strike up a conversation with any random. And it doesn't even have to be a confidence thing. I challenge you, if you live in Australia, the next 10 people that you see while you're out and about tomorrow, just try and have a conversation with them. Yes, you will probably get one that is a bit of a social recluse, and you might feel a little bit scorned by trying to strike up some kind of record with them, but they will be the minority. So if you're ever wondering in Australia, no, I don't really find it easy speaking to people, then maybe it's you, but only temporarily. You haven't tried speaking to the right one yet. Australia has one of the highest taxes on alcohol than anywhere in the world. I think they're 3rd. And booze here isn't really cheap. I mean, the wages are higher, so comparatively, you don't really notice it. Like, they keep trying to put the taxes on booze up every year, and it literally does not stop Australians from drinking so much. And I'm not gonna get into the whole debate about a lovely British pub, because a Wetherspoons, in my opinion, isn't really a quintessential British pub. It just seems to be a cheap alcohol event on steroids, a place for raucous people to meet for pre-drinks on a night out. I mean, they don't even play any music in there, so it's not really like there's much ambience. But in Australia, the whole kind of cheap pub vibe isn't really a thing. I mean, some places they do have happy hour, which doesn't seem to be a very British thing. But then I guess they just make it that alcohol is perpetually cheaper all of the time. Kind of thinking about it, you just kind of come to expect it, don't you? Where's the cheapest place to drink in any new town that you've never been to in the UK? Let's go and find a Wetherspoons. Personally, I think that Wetherspoons would make an absolute killing if they came to Australia. But if you're still interested in the weird things that I've noticed from moving from the UK to Australia, then watch this video. It's basically me just going and rambling on again. See you next time.